Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Cougar, the Bitch, and the Wardrobe. I'm your host, Lana Mazer, also known as Curated by the Cougar. Thank you so much for joining me here today as we discuss the perfectly imperfect, embracing imperfection in relationships. I think that this is a really timely topic. Not that it's never untimely to discuss relationships, as we all like to do, but it's just been very interesting lately to see all of the media surrounding the Vogue article about how it's not cool to have a boyfriend anymore. And I thought that it was just interesting. It was a very well written article. And I think that it did make some interesting points. But I don't really want to spend a lot of time talking about that, more so because we have a lot to cover today here on the podcast. So, I want to discuss the idea about living beyond idealization. So, it's totally normal that when we enter into a relationship with someone and it's all very, very new and it's very exciting and the birds are singing and the flowers are in bloom and everything's wonderful. And we just think that this person that has come into our lives is just perfection. And in those moments, sometimes we then go deep inside ourselves, and then we are concerned that we cannot measure up, that this person is just the creme de la creme, and they are so perfect, and we put them up on a pedestal. And then we start to go into this deep dive, this dark place of everything that's wrong with us and how this person is going to discover all of our imperfections. And that is going to be the end of the relationship. And I think that it's really important to not only recognize this, but recognize the fact that it is what happens in the beginning of relationships. And not only are we doing that to this person, but they're doing it to you also. And so I think that we, in the beginning, do this dance of being on our best behavior so as not to burst the bubble of perfection, to actually showcase who we really are and our perfect imperfections. And so, this idealization that happens is something that we do to that person, and they are doing it to us. Whereas we could just, cut through the crap and just come right out and be like, this is who I am. And who are you? And have a real discussion. And again, like, I know that that's not the reality of how things go when we're dating and it's the honeymoon phase and all of that. But I guess the point of what I'm trying to say is that I do want to encourage my listeners today to understand that that's what's going on both sides. And that, quite honestly, to have a relationship that's built on reality and stability and emotional intelligence and love and friendship, that we really do need to express who we are sooner rather than later, because not only do we want to do that for that person to accept and love us, but we want to see who that person truly is. And are they the person that's meant for us? Because there's a lot of time where we explore the concept of this perfect person versus perfect for us. And I really don't like using the word perfect because there is no such thing. But again, for the sake of our conversation today, I just want to use that as an example. I also want to dig into a little bit about the concept of a soulmate. Now, if you are that person that believes there's that one person out there for you, that one magical, beautiful soulmate, that's your prerogative. I don't believe that there's one soulmate for us. I believe that there are multiple soulmates for us. And again, when I'm using the word soulmate, I don't mean that it has to be the person that we engage in a long-standing romantic relationship with, whether it be boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, partner. You can have friends that are your soulmates. You can have a family member that is a soulmate. And then potentially throughout your life and love and relationships, maybe you have multiple romantic soulmates. So I think that in many ways, that thought process, that way of looking at love and relationships also tends to take away some of that pressure, that idealization of that perfect person. Is this person my soulmate? And I got into a conversation today with one of my close friends about the intentions of entering into marriage. Now, I've been married twice, and both times entering into these marriages, my intentions were that those relationships would have been forever. I did not get married thinking that I was going to get divorced. I definitely didn't think I would get married twice and divorced twice. But here I am. And I'm not sitting here now at 48 years old and looking back on these relationships and saying, all right, well, I've met my quota of soulmates, so that's it for me. No, I don't think that at all. I think that I have multiple, many soulmates out there, and maybe the next one is right around the corner. Who knows? But my point is that for me, I think that alleviates a lot of that putting that person on the pedestal, idealizing who this person is, and are they going to live up to that expectation of soulmate? Now, I'm not suggesting nor recommending that you lower your standards of what you're looking for, but I just think it's important to realize that we are not perfect beings. We are perfectly imperfect, and we need to recognize that when we are seeking that love, partnership, etc. I think that there are a lot of examples where the people we love or we are looking to be in love with are based on certain ideals that maybe we were raised with, certain, saying this, we all know the saying, this person looks good on paper, and they check all the boxes. And so then we meet that person. Now that person is not a sheet of paper, but is a human being, flesh and blood, and realizing that they have these imperfections. And again, this is what makes relationships interesting and can strengthen relationships, and recognizing that this is who we are. Now, again, entering into a long term relationship with someone, recognizing that we are imperfect, that doesn't mean that if there are certain things about this person that doesn't necessarily resonate with your ideals, your life goals, things that you really honor and hold true to your heart, and you feel are necessary for you to be with that person long term. If that person doesn't encompass those things and that is problematic for you, then they are not your person. I do believe that entering into a relationship and now after 2 marriages and having my children and being, of course, older and much wiser and having had these life experiences. Looking back, I realized that there was so much that I felt about myself. I remember when I was in my 20s and then even early 30s after my first divorce, that I was nervous and scared about opening up about certain things about my family that I've talked about on previous episodes of the podcast that I felt would be a negative representation of me, of my family. And I was very concerned that in looking to date someone and potentially get married, that someone would not be interested in pursuing a relationship with me if they found out about my deepest, darkest secrets. So I remember when I was in college and even meeting my boyfriend that turned out to be a long term relationship for 4 years, I remember being really embarrassed to let on that my parents were going through this terrible divorce. So we met in the beginning of my junior year of college. At that point, my parents were still not divorced. The divorce had been taking a long time. At this point, it was probably 3 years that it had been going on. And I was embarrassed because again, we don't know what goes on behind closed doors for other people, but I idealized this person because he had this intact family. I obviously met his parents and got to know them quite well, and they were very much a loving couple, and they were supportive and welcoming and all the things. And I felt like I came from this broken home and I was embarrassed. And I felt if I let on to this person that this is where I come from, he is not going to want to be with me. And obviously, I learned through that experience that that was not the case. And he did eventually find out from me what was going on with my family. And the relationship went on for 4 years. Also, part of that, as I've discussed, is that I had a lot of embarrassment, shame about my mother's mental illness. And it was something that affected me on a very deep level. And as much as I knew that I wasn't like my mother in that way, I was very, very nervous that if I shared that with a boyfriend, that they would automatically think that I would turn into my mother one day. And I was very scared about that. And truthfully, again, in all relationships, everything eventually comes out, and especially over time. And and I guess what I'm saying is that I've learned from those experiences that you ultimately really want to be with someone who's going to embrace and love all the parts of you and love and embrace the person that you are at that point in time and how you got there, and to respect and honor your personal struggles and your accomplishments and everything in between. And so I have found that sharing that information early on shows a lot about the person sitting across from you. Are they going to be emotionally available to you, loving, accepting, understanding, so that you can grow together in this lifetime? Because it's not going to be that one thing that happened to you when you were 10. And even if it was something like in my situation that persisted over my childhood with my mother, there are going to be other things that happen, and you want to really understand and see if that person can hold you and support you when you need to be held and when you need to be supported. And it's not just when the sun is shining and the birds are singing and everything is peaches and cream. It has to be everything. And so a lot of that is really putting it out there and not putting that person on the pedestal, not idealizing them, and understanding that they also have their things that they are working through and will either embrace who you are. And same for you. Are you going to embrace that person if they come to you and share something that's important to them or something that affected them when they were younger or now or still going on, whatever it is? Those perfect imperfections, that's what makes us who we are. And I do think that the process of cultivating real love, and again, this doesn't just have to be in a romantic relationship, but can also be in friendship, is really being able to discuss the messiness of life and being there to understand who that person is that's sitting across the table from you, sharing this information with. Because maybe it's not just idealizing a romantic partner, but maybe it's also idealizing a friend, putting them on this pedestal. They're so untouchable, and you feel like you can't share those parts of yourself, your history, your personality, all those things. And we're all seeking that ability or that moment to be really seen for who we are and accepted for who we are. I want to take a moment here to further discuss embracing flaws and how they can significantly enhance our personal relationships in several ways. So one of the first things that comes to mind is authenticity. So when we can share our imperfections, it does foster a sense of authenticity. The transparency there leads to deeper connections as both partners feel more comfortable being themselves without the pressure to maintain a facade. And I am referencing my notes here because otherwise I feel like I'm going to leave certain things out. So, um, and then the second thing is trust building. So, sharing those vulnerabilities can strengthen trust between partners. When flaws are openly discussed, it signals that both individuals are willing to be vulnerable, which creates a safe space for mutual sharing and understanding. And I really think that that's so important because, again, it's that idealization of the other person, and then recognizing that if we can create this understanding between two people, we are willing to be vulnerable. These are the things that really create deep, deep, deep emotional connections. And I think that in terms of longevity in relationships, this is so key. This is so key because now that I look back on my previous marriages, my first and my second marriage, with both men, and they're very different individuals in so many ways, but one of the really big similarities between the two of them is their inability to be vulnerable. And I think that when I was younger, I saw that as a sign of like strength and masculinity because I'm more of an emotional person and feel the feels and all the things. And I want to talk about feelings and life and all that stuff. And so maybe at the time I thought that was a good balance to my personality, but I realized that it left such a gaping hole in those relationships. Like it took away that ability to really get to know each other on a deeper, more spiritual level. I think also reducing the expectations, and meaning that embracing each other's flaws helps set realistic expectations in relationships. When we recognize, and I said this earlier, that everyone has shortcomings, we are less likely to idealize one another or hold unrealistic standards, reducing feelings of disappointment and resentment. And so, to touch on that a little bit more, I think it is taking that person off of the pedestal, really understanding who they are, really getting to know them. So that way, if there's that moment in time where that person has their fall from grace, we're not like, "Oh my god, like, where is this coming from?" It's actually not a fall from grace, it's just they're a human being, but we didn't really give ourselves the opportunity or that person to really express who they are. Another point here is enhanced communication. So, discussing imperfections opens avenues for honest communication when we can express our feelings, needs, concerns more freely, which is essential for conflict resolution and overall relationship health. I really can't speak to this enough. Being able to communicate with your partner, if you can't do that in the beginning stages, it's never going to get any better. If you have trouble expressing yourself, or you're embarrassed, or you feel that that person gets angry or is defensive or passive aggressive or any of those things, this is a major, major red flag that is waving in your face. And you cannot ignore it. If communication is off the table from the beginning, I don't know how you get it back on the table. So I think that that's really, really important. Compassion and empathy, recognizing and accepting each other's flaws, fosters compassion. So are you able to speak to your partner about things that you either find disturbing or upsetting, or things that have happened to you, and can that person embrace you and understand that that's part of who you are, the beauty of the imperfections? And on the other side of the spectrum, this person that you have been idealizing, what happens if they come to you and they say, "Hey, like, I want to share this with you"? Are you able to embrace that and have compassion and empathy for something that they have struggled with or are currently struggling with? And having a growth mindset, embracing flaws encourages both partners to adopt a growth mindset. Instead of viewing mistakes as failures, you can see them as opportunities for growth and learning, promoting collective development and improvement. That's so important because, as we know, throughout the ups and downs of relationships, marriage, friendship, anything, there are times where there's moments of joy and excitement and celebration, and then sometimes moments of disappointment and failures. You can be in a situation with a spouse, and that person might have had a very successful career for many years, and then all of a sudden, they lose this job that might have been part of their identity for a lifetime. Are you able to have a growth mindset with that person and really be able to view any mistakes that they have made, or failures? I don't like to use the word failure, but and see them as a way to become a stronger force, a stronger partnership, help guide that person to find their next moment where they feel successful in what they're doing. Increased resilience. As I said, we are bound to face challenges, and acknowledging imperfections equips us to navigate difficulties with greater resilience, as we can rely on each other's support and understanding during tough times. And fostering acceptance. Accepting flaws encourages, as a culture, to accept other people and accept the people that we have close relationships with. And we can learn to appreciate each other holistically, nurturing an environment where both individuals feel valued for who they are and not just their strengths. I do think it's really important that as individuals, we need to own our light and own our darkness. And what I mean by that is not that like you go to sleep at night and you become a vampire. I mean that like we all have those we all have the light side and the dark side, the things that scare us, maybe things that we're embarrassed to talk about, things that create anxiety, nervousness, things that keep us up at night, and recognizing and realizing that we have that within us, I think makes us not only more self-aware but more accepting of others when they also showcase to us that they have their light and dark side. And I really do believe, again, that from my experience in relationships and my marriages, that being able to do that really creates such a strong emotional bond between two people. We hear these buzzwords like emotional intelligence. I really think that there's something to be said for accepting and understanding our lightness and darkness and someone else's. And that makes us more emotionally intelligent human beings, more empathetic. And being able to, in those moments, if we recognize that we have that inside us and someone else has that, that helps to nurture that relationship and the direction ultimately that that relationship will will go through, whether it's moving forward or not. And I do think also is recognizing too that when someone shares something with us that's very personal and we need to be respectful that they are telling us something and honor that we want to be very, very, very careful with, well, I want to say potentially not repeating that to anybody else if you feel that it's something that affects you as well in the relationship and you find it necessary that you need to talk about it. I implore you that you're very, very careful with who you share the information with, because I have seen that blow up in people's faces in the past, and it will very quickly end a relationship because there's no longer that trust there. I think that being able to navigate those situations and being able to talk about it with your partner, and if you feel that it's something that requires an intervention, a professional intervention, if we're talking about something serious, as in substance abuse or someone wanting to hurt themselves, again, that is a time when it makes sense to let a professional know, because we have to obviously take this very seriously when that happens. But just in discussing emotions and maybe someone is being raw and open with you, you have to be careful about who you share that information with. And also, I have been in situations where I've seen, like, if I shared something with a friend about my boyfriend at the time, and then if I would, and if it was something that maybe was like in it, was put them in a negative light, then, the friend might then try to throw that in my face, be like, "Well, I told you so," and this and that, and never be able to have a conversation about that person because they only see them in that one way. And you wanna be very careful with that, because that person that you're sharing the information with doesn't have all the facts and they're not in the relationship. So I think that's also really important to be aware of. So I do want today, as a sort of call to action to challenge my listeners today to drop the masks and embrace the imperfections in themselves, yourselves, and your loved ones. I really think that it will only open the door to more beautiful, meaningful, spiritual, engaging conversations and relationships. And I would love to hear your thoughts on this, any feelings. Please feel free to DM me on Instagram at Curated by the Cougar, also on TikTok at Curated by the Cougar, and on YouTube at Curated by the Cougar, on Spotify, The Cougar, The Bitch, and The Wardrobe. Please share this episode with someone that you think this might be helpful, and that might also help to engage a conversation with your friend or partner about the perfectly imperfect. Until next time.